So in my last video, when I gave my closing thoughts on using the Lixada wood stove, and especially using it with the alcohol burner, in my case the Alex burner, I demonstrated that a windscreen that I had built for it was no longer going to fit. It just barely works. Even now you can see that the height of it, the windscreen should be a little higher. But when I put the crossbars on top of the stove, the windscreen certainly did not come up and cover the bottom of the pot, which is what you're looking for. So I thought what I would do today is build a new windscreen, show you how I go about making these inexpensive windscreens. If you're interested, stay tuned. Okay, just before we get started on the project itself, what I thought I would do is just talk about windscreens for a moment, why I believe they're important, and show you another option if you don't want to go through the process of making your own. So in a number of my videos, especially the ones where I'm using the wood stoves, this wood screen has appeared. It seems to have, there we go, locked itself together. It's a lightweight aluminum windscreen with all the panels hinged together, and on the end of each panel there is a bar, see if I can show this closely enough, that will extend out the end. And what that's for is so that if you're setting it up on soft ground, you can set the windscreen up and then push those bars into the earth to hold them in place. Oh, all covered in soot, great. So this is a good little windscreen. It's got a bit of weight to it, but it's aluminum. It's also very sturdy and provides you a number of options for setting it up. Even so, I have found that on occasion I will need to support it somehow with either some stones or a piece of wood on the outside just to keep the wind from blowing it over if it is kind of tall. So there is a budget windscreen, and I picked this up on eBay a few years ago very inexpensively. I would just suggest looking on eBay and searching windscreen or aluminum windscreen, and I know you'll find a number of different versions of this. So very inexpensive option. They come in different sizes. This is a nice small one, easier to pack and better to use if you've only got a short height stove. It's not something I would use with most of my wood stove, although I have just learned it's probably just the right height for using with my Lixada, and that's an option. I could take that with me in my little Lixada setup, but I like the idea of making an inexpensive aluminum windscreen that packs down even lighter and smaller in the little kit that I have. But I wanted to show you these options. So why do you need a windscreen at all? Well, by the very name of it, windscreen, you'll get the impression that it's to block the wind, and that's exactly what it does. If you're set up in an area that has any wind at all, and it doesn't take very much, the wind will rob the heat away from your cook pot. Whatever it is you're using, is either wood or alcohol, wood pellets, or anything else that you're using to burn in your stove, be it an alcohol stove or any other stove for that matter, the wind will rob heat away. That means it'll take longer for if it's water you're bringing to a boil, it'll be longer for your water to come to a boil. If it's cooking something else up, you're robbing heat away from that and consuming fuel. Yes, I know that's not a big issue if you have lots of little sticks to use, but it's much better if you can control the heat and get a consistent heat by using a windscreen to block some of that wind away. Now, you don't want to completely occlude the air from reaching your sources. We've talked incessantly about in the last number of videos. Having good airflow, especially in the little wood stoves, is all important. But still, you do need to block the wind. So a windscreen will help the efficiency of any stove. So having some type of windscreen is vitally important. Okay, enough said. Let's show you what I'm going to use today to make the windscreen for this little stove. So I've gone to the dollar store and I picked up a couple of very inexpensive aluminum plates. Now, this one is a cookie sheet that I picked up. I believe this was 3 wrapped together for $1, just lightweight aluminum. And that's what I am going to use today. But as an option, this is an oven liner. I think this came also at $1 from the dollar store. But I've gone and used as big as roasting pans that you can also get at the dollar store, and they're also good material. I like using this one, the oven liner, because there's no sides that I have to cut off or try and fold down, and I can use that. But for this project, I'm going to use the cookie sheet, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. So as far as tools go, tools can be very, very simple. For this project, I'm going to use a box cutter and a ruler. And now I've got an 18-inch ruler here, and it's a metal ruler, and that's going to serve 2 purposes, not only measuring my project, but the edge of it allows me to fold the aluminum over, as you'll see in a minute. Piece of wooden doweling, 1-inch wooden doweling. This is going to act like a rolling pin for me to roll the edges flat, and I'll show you that when we get to it. And a dollar store hole punch. That's all I'm going to use. Alternatively, I could have used a pair of scissors. Don't use your wife's good sewing scissors. Word of experience. I could have used that. Now, other materials that you could be using. This is aluminum flashing, chimney flashing, gutter flashing, whatever you want to call it. And I bought a roll of this some years ago, and I've slowly been working down to it. And I've used this to make windscreens for stoves like my wood stoves. It is lightweight, it's very effective and very efficient, but it doesn't pack all that small. So you're going to have some type of a package where you can roll up your windscreen and put it inside of your pot maybe, and then it will work. This being a little heavier will not cut quite so well with a box cutter. However, really all you need is a pair of paramedic shears. These are from my paramedic days, and they work for cutting aluminum. They'll cut virtually anything. But if you have them, of course, metal shears. So they'll also work for cutting that windscreen, or excuse me, that aluminum flashing. But for today, it's going to be a cookie sheet, a box cutter, my ruler, my 1-inch doweling, and my hole punch. Oh, one more thing I'm going to add to this project at the end. It's not so much part of the construction, but these are skewers. They are stainless steel skewers. They come in a package of 8 skewers from the dollar store for $1.25. And these skewers have been useful in any number of projects. I've used it for bales over top of a pot. I've used it for windscreens like this. I can think of all kinds of things that these would be useful for. So they're just a nice thing to have around, and I have a few packages for projects. And what these will be when I'm finished is these will be the stakes on the edge of the windscreen that I can drive into soft earth to keep the windscreen from blowing away. So we'll just put those aside for now. Okay, let me get set up and I'll start the project. Okay, to start this project, you need to decide just how big your windscreen needs to be. So the easiest thing for me to do is I could measure this, but I'm just going to take my little stove and lay it down. And since this windscreen was, well, 3 for $1, I believe it was. I'm going to try and use the whole bottom sheet that's in this, and I'm going to just cut the sides off just to make it easy for myself. I could go so far as to use my stick and just simply like a roller roll the thing flat, and this aluminum will give and will roll itself flat with some wrinkles, but I'm going to make it a little easier on myself and just cut out the bottom of the sheet and go from there. You do need more to the material than your finished side, and you'll see what I mean, because you're going to be folding edges over to create strength and to get rid of the raw edges. But just make sure that you've got more than enough material to give you the height that you want. And what I'm looking for is something that's going to be about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches above the top of the stove when I'm finished. So I'm going to start by cutting that out. Now, rather than make you listen to the noise of me cutting aluminum, I will start this project and then show you how I'm going to do it and then finish it off camera. So I think for this, I'm just going to take my inexpensive scissors and cut the bottom plate out, and I'll bring you back when that's done. Okay, so I've just used my scissors to cut through the aluminum plating, and really it is as easy as cutting through paper. It cuts very, very easily, and so it's, you don't have to worry about ruining your scissors. You could use a box cutter, a knife, or anything else you have for this. A pair of scissors, inexpensive, I believe they're dollar store scissors as well, work just fine for cutting that. So I'll toss that away. Now, one of the considerations I didn't mention is I did say how high, and make sure you have enough room for the height that you want to have, but how about the length as well? Well, the punch or the windscreen that I have been using has 4 sides to it. And with the little wood stove, that's more than needs to be for it there. I could really just get away with 3 sides and it would work just fine. A 4-sided one provides more protection than is needed. You can see right here that I've got more protection than I need, and I can fold that into any configuration I want once it's set up. So yeah, this is useful to have that bigger one, but not necessary. So with the project that I'm going to be doing today, I'm not going to get one as long. As you can see, it won't be as long as this one is now. So what I'm going to have to do is decide if I want one about 3 sides in length. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to make a tri-fold instead of a quad fold in the windscreen. So only because the material I have is not long enough. If I had used the large oven liner, it would have worked just fine. And that's in fact what this original one is made out of, was an oven liner. But for this project, I'm just going to go 3-sided. By the way, when I'm finished, this one's not going in the garbage. I have a lot of other little stoves that I can use this for, so I'll keep that around. All right, once I've got that cut out, I want to make it as flat as possible, because we have to start with at least 1 square edge. So I need to get this flat, and the easiest way to do that is with this piece of wood. Roll it, rub it, flatten down all the little creases that are in it. That's pretty flat. Roll it over. And there. That is now flat. On my table, I have placed just a couple little pieces of, I guess they're fiberboard of some type, just to protect the surface of my table from the knife. So I'm going to use my metal ruler and find a square, or just create a square edge, one line. And I'm not too concerned about wasting material here, although I don't want to cut too much off and then find myself short. Trying to do this at an angle that you can see what I'm doing. My box cutter. You don't have to press very hard. Watch your fingers. There. So now I have a square edge. Now with that square edge from here, I'm going to fold it up twice. Now you can fold up 3 times, 4 times, however much you want, but folding it up twice will get rid of that cut edge that I just created with the box cutter. So the way to do that, you can do it hanging off the edge of the table. I'm going to try and stay in screen here, see if I can stay in screen while I'm doing this, or in frame. Is again, take my ruler and work my way back from the edge of the material, half inch or so. Try to be as straight as possible. If you want to mark this with a pen for preciseness, you can. I find it's not necessary to be that precise. I think I'll use the other side just to hold it better. Again, I'm working at an angle here so you can see what I'm doing. And with your straight edge, be it a ruler or anything else, fold up. Start the fold over the edge. And then you can take that out and fold it down. So I've got one edge folded over. Now, anyone who's worked with material on a sewing machine would know this is basically just creating a nice edge, finished edge on your material, except you're working with metal instead of cloth. In this case, I'm just going to flatten it out again with this piece of doweling. Nice and flat. Very good. Now, I'll do the same thing again, working right where I left off at that edge. See what I'm doing here? Start the edge up again. Fold it down. And flatten it. Now, I have a nice, clean, finished edge, no sharp edges. Not that this aluminum's going to cut you or anything, but this, what it does for me mostly is it strengthens this edge and gives some rigidity to the material. You can see how much more stable it is now that I've done that. I can make it even more stable by folding it again and again, as much as you want. If you want to use up some of the extra material by strengthening it that way, you can certainly do that. So what I'm going to do now from here is turn it around and do the same thing on the other side, and I'll fold until I get to the height that I think it's where I want to be. So rather than repeat this process on camera, I'll do it off camera and bring it back when I've got it to the height. Okay, so off camera, I took the other edge, folded over once, folded over again, and I folded it over a third time. Returned to the original edge and folded that over one more time. I could have cut more material off, but it does strengthen it to have 3 folds. You could go 4 folds. The reason I went with 3 folds is that's because that is about the height I want this to be. So you can see, compare it against the height of the original. I've gained an extra almost 2 inches, 1 3/4, and that will bring it above the pot stands on my stove. So here it is measured against the stove. You can see I've got considerable more height now to protect the stove from the wind. You want the windscreen to come above your pot stand and start up the side of your pot. Now you can go all the way to the top of your pot and all the way above your pot if you want for maximum protection, but I don't think it's necessary, and I balance that against packability. And I don't want this to be so big that I can't pack it away. Certainly that commercially made one will do exactly that. That would go well above my pot stand and right around the pot for maximum. But it's a bit big and a bit heavy. So there is my almost finished pot stand at this point. So I am going to fold it into thirds. This is not being precise. It's more of a loose measurement. Somewhere right around there.
Now that it's getting thicker, it's getting a little bit more difficult to fold accurately, but there. And I'll go back and fold it the other way into the first crease. There. Okay, that's pretty good. So now here is my 90% completed pot stand. A little bit thick there. I've got to fold that a little bit more accurately. Yeah, that should do it. All right, so that's now 90% or 95% complete. All that's missing is a few holes in the bottom. Holes are not necessary. They just do add to a little extra airflow at the bottom. So to do that, decide which is going to be the bottom of your... Oh, before I progress, I thought of what I'd show you is on the edges, I also folded the ends in twice. I didn't fold it a third time, but I folded them in twice. Where you get to the edges, outside edges, that's going to have a lot of folds. It'll be a little bit more difficult to flatten. You don't have to hammer it. You can, but you don't have to hammer it. I just used the end of my doweling and just pushed down on it, and it's flattened it quite nicely. Very malleable, very easy to work with. All right, so where do I want some holes? So I'm going to use my hole punch, and I'm just going to see if I can make a series of holes somewhere along the bottom here, and I can see this is going to be right along the crease. That's okay, that'll work just fine. And these have a tendency to fly around, so be aware that you want to be, pristine and make it look perfect. You can measure exactly where each hole is going to be. I don't need that for me. And I'll just work my way around the screen. I won't make you watch me go all the way around. I'll show you the finished product here. And when I come back, I'll show you my last step. Okay, so off camera, I took my hole punch and just worked my way around the bottom and created 2 lines of holes just opposite each other. And that'll allow for airflow, as this is sitting on the ground, to come into the bottom of the stove but not affect the top of the stove where the pot is resting or is being protected. So those air holes are all cut. I've also cut 2 more holes in the outside edge here, one here and one here. And these are going to be for the stakes that'll hold this in the ground if I decide to use them. So the one part I haven't done now is to take the 2 rods that I have, the 2 skewers, and cut them to length, because obviously this is going to be too long. But when I go to use it, I can run them inside or through the holes, either way, from the inside or from the outside, and then into the ground on both sides, and that's how it would hold the thing in place. Now, to cut these, because they're stainless steel, it's not real simple. It's not real easy. The easiest way, well, for me, I use a Dremel tool, but if I'm suggesting to you to cut these, you can cut them with a hacksaw and then maybe a file or a stone just to put a small point back on the end of it. A Dremel tool is not necessary, but it does help a lot for a lot of these small projects. If you can get a Dremel tool or find a second-hand Dremel tool, actually the one I use is a second-hand Dremel tool. That's what I use for most of these little projects. So rather than show cutting this with the Dremel tool, you'll take my word for it, decide how long you want it, maybe 2 or 3 inches longer than the top of your windscreen is, but not so big that it won't fit in whatever package you're going to be carrying them in. And then you'll have 2 stakes that you can use to hold the windscreen in place around the outside. Okay, so that's all there is. There's my completed windscreen. All right, let's close this video up. Okay, simple and effective. You could certainly buy yourself a commercially made windscreen like this one. They're not very expensive. They're very handy to use, very stable, very durable. A little heavy, a little bulky, but that's okay. Or you can make yourself one. You can make it out of, like I did, this was an aluminum cookie sheet, heavier than the aluminum foil you're going to be wrapping your food up in if you decide to do that, but certainly heavy enough for this project. Easy to make, very few tools. You could go so far as to use a piece of flashing and you can make an even stronger one. They don't fold so well, but they do roll up nicely and you can put them inside of another pot or whatever it is you're using, as long as it'll fit in. But that's all it is, just a simple tool. I would encourage you to get out and buy a couple of these things and make them. I would encourage you to use windscreens in all your stoves. I think you'll find that it will help with the efficiency, regardless if it's a wood stove or an alcohol stove. Okay, that's all there is to this video. So if you enjoyed this quick tip, this easy build, this DIY project, consider subscribing to my channel. I'll probably come up with a few more of these along the way, but in the meantime, get out and explore. Take that path less traveled. It'll make all the difference. Bye for now.